Hey, thanks for checking out The Solid Verbal. Now would be a great time to subscribe to the channel for college football content all off season long.
Welcome back to The Solid Verbal, boys and girls. My name is Ty Hildenbrand. That fine gentleman over there is always the illustrious Dan Rubenstein in the heart of the Midwest. Spent some time at the beach. I think that's what you call it in Chicago, the beach?
Yeah, it's what we got to call it. But yeah, it's a lake beach.
Long Lake, Michigan. Welcome back, sir. How are you?
I'm great, Ty. Life is terrific. We have terrific questions for today's Q&A. I learned that the preview magazines are now out. And so I got one of those up.
Right here. Which one did you get?
Same one, right next to my toilet. I've already been perusing. And it's the one time a year I go to a specific newsstand. Right? Not like a grocery store, not like I go to the dedicated newsstand where they have every single magazine, every single newspaper that you could possibly want. And I do the same thing every year. And I FaceTime my wife and I say, black or Latin inches. I always forget. And she never finds it funny. Never, ever. And then I buy the college football preview magazine and come home.
Yeah, I've got mine too. I've started going through it. It is that time of year. We're starting to inch ever so close to preview season. I think as we get into the latter half of July or so, that's when you can expect us to roll out all of our conference and team preview stuff like we've done every year for like the last 15 straight seasons. We will get there before you know it. We're also going to get into over-unders here in the next handful of weeks. We're going to attach a game to that, which you can find, of course, exclusively at verballers.com, verballers.com. We would encourage you to at least hit follow or subscribe if you're finding us for the very first time. Tell a friend if you've already done so. That would be very, very helpful. As always, we're trying to grow the footprint of the Verballerhood and invite as many people as we can under the tent. Make sure you follow along on social media as well as YouTube. As for today, Dan...
Congratulations, Skippy. You've got mail.
You've got mail on the Solid Verbal.
As often as we can here in the off season, usually about once a month or so, we like to pay homage to those of you who write in solidverbal@gmail.com. Send us tweets and
Instagram messages,
Facebook posts. Yeah, you name it. The whole 9 yards. We like to pay homage to the fine folks who send in questions as they are prompted to do so, Dan. Let's start with Gary over on Patreon. What up, Gary? Since you've completed all the schedule previews for all of the Power 5 and G5 conferences, who would you be most shocked if they didn't make the college football playoff and why? So, tipping our hand a little bit here, I guess. We haven't fully gone through these magazines yet and what others have had to say about their favorite teams and in the way of previews and whatnot. But
are you waiting to decide on your college football opinions for the upcoming season based on what Laura and Stephen Athlon have to say? Is that where your brain goes? Is that the secret sauce behind the Ty Hildenbrand magic?
Okay. Speaking of magic.
Yeah.
This question is like one of those magic tricks where you cut the deck 6 times and, you remove all the clubs from the deck and you tear a few in half and there's only one card left and the guy doing the trick always knows what it is and they flip the card over and it's always Georgia. It's always Georgia, Dan. If Georgia does not make the playoff with this schedule, with the talent they still have on the roster, I know they have a new quarterback, Carson Beck. Supposedly he's pretty good.
New old offensive coordinator, Mike Bobo.
New old offensive coordinator. If Georgia does not make the playoff, I think something's wrong. That would find me quite surprised if that did not happen. Is there a different answer for you?
Well, probably because of their schedule, Michigan, because we're now talking about a team who has now made 2 college football playoffs, and because of their schedule this year, and you obviously mentioned Georgia just now, but Georgia's specific schedule is another reason why, even despite their talent, despite their recent success, we had the Georgia-Oklahoma game be canceled upon Oklahoma joining the SEC, so their schedule is especially navigable. Love that word.
Yeah.
Michigan's in a similar place without, I don't believe, the cancellation of an interesting non-conference opponent, but the way that their home road splits shake out, the way that the Big Ten specifically is looking, Michigan is in a nice place. They get, Penn State and Ohio State late, and they return their quarterback, kind of a new old offensive or old new pseudo-offensive coordinator, elevating, Sherrone Moore, the associate head coach, offensive line coach. He's now the full-time offensive coordinator. Defensive coordinators new. So there's just a lot new with some of these teams, but also not so much. So Michigan and Georgia would be surprising the way it shakes out, even if Ohio State beats Michigan. Michigan probably on paper in terms of percentages with that game in Ann Arbor. Those would be surprising teams to not make it. Otherwise, nobody in the Big 12 strikes me as a sure thing. Nobody in the Pac-12 strikes me as that degree of a sure thing because of schedule. Oregon's schedule becomes easier. Washington's schedule is a little bit tricky, but they host Oregon, and I think it's Boise State and Michigan State in the non-conference portion of their schedule. USC's defense should be improved, but they have a trip to Oregon and I believe a trip to Notre Dame, right?
Yeah.
So their schedule is a little bit more landmine-y, and so nobody in the ACC really. I know we're big believers in Clemson and Florida State taking a step forward, but not necessarily in a sure thing fashion. So I think that's where I go in terms of
Michigan
playing the percentages.
Yeah,
Georgia and Michigan. Yeah,
I think that's fair. Evan out on Instagram left this one for us. Since you were, I think, talking about the Pac-12, maybe we can unpack this a little bit further.
Okay.
How many playoff contending teams does the Pac-12 have this year? So, look, at first blush, it's Oregon and USC. And I think more Oregon than USC because USC's schedule is actually pretty difficult. I don't really like USC's schedule the way it's said, but I like their quarterback and I like Lincoln Riley. I don't know if I like their defense. I'll have to get back to you on that one. But Oregon and USC, I think, are the obvious ones. I would list Washington as a dark horse. I like Utah. Utah's schedule is brutal. And though some of the Utah folks have argued and said, well, there's a radio guy in Utah who says that Cam Rising's knee will be just fine for opening day.
Is that a thing? Did we receive that kind of messaging?
I've seen that type of messaging.
Okay.
All right. I hope for Cam Rising's sake that is the case.
Sure.
However, ACL injuries have been around a while now, and though they've drastically reduced the recovery time for said injury, I'll believe it when I see it.
Sure.
I'll believe it when I see it. So that notwithstanding, the Utah schedule is brutal. It's not fair. I don't know who did it to them, but that I think is a limiting factor for them, which is why I would not necessarily include them in this conversation as being a quote-unquote playoff contending team. Outside of Oregon and USC and maybe Washington, is there anybody I forgot, and how do you feel about those three teams?
No, those four teams. I say Utah, Washington, Oregon, USC. I'd pump brake. I think they're all contending at their best. I think all of them have clear potential to, we're having this conversation on November 9th, and like, oh man, it could work out that any one of those four teams, right? As I see it now, we could be having this conversation about any of those teams. Those are also flawed teams, right?
Sure.
That Washington's back end, Washington's offensive line, Washington's running game, Oregon's defense, Oregon's ability to get to the passer, a lot of new faces on the Oregon defense. You know, Bo Nix was wildly inconsistent before last year. And so does he regress to, 3 good weeks out of every 4? And is that enough to get Oregon in that conversation? Can the defense be good enough? And USC's defense, adding a couple key pieces, Bear Alexander, Mason Cobb, and obviously having the probably most dynamic playmaker in the sport at quarterback. USC is in that conversation because the best of USC is a team that can drop 40 to 50 points on almost anybody in the country. Certainly the teams on their schedule. There's not a team on their schedule that you can say, I don't see them dropping 42 or having the ability to drop 42 against. Utah, obviously Cam Rising's health, Utah's longstanding ability to not generate bigger plays, especially through the air. On offense, all of these teams are worthwhile in terms of having these conversations, but all of them have clear questions and flaws where you're like, I could see this conversation happening in early November, but I could also see 2 of these teams finishing 8-4 and 2 of these teams in this a top 12, top 15, top 8 conversation in November. So there are clear flaws standing in the way, separating these types of teams with teams that are more obviously built to have that mid-November conversation.
The mid-November conversation. Yeah.
Which, by the way, I would put Washington, just because I'm not. What does their road schedule look like? You can pull this up as I'm vamping and waxing poetic, but at his best, Michael Penix makes truly incredible throws. They might have the best duo of winter wonder type receivers in the conference, and they can get after the passer. I don't see Washington as a dark horse at this point because of the experience they bring back and the schedule that they have in front of them. I don't think you keep Washington out of that top group. I just would like to see it from a complete perspective from Washington at this moment. And so, look, they won close a bunch last year, and typically after winning close, you win comfortably. But I don't think they're behind Oregon and USC. I just think there's that top 4 tier right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you go back and listen to the Pac-12 episode, but Washington's over-under is 9. I think we labeled it, at least I did, as one of the easier slates in the Pac-12. The road schedule isn't bad. I said it's a little weird because they go to Michigan State. They've got Arizona. They've got Stanford. They've got USC and Oregon State.
Okay,
Decent buffers. November could get a little dicey.
Yeah.
But it's not the type of thing that I looked at and I said, this is overwhelming. They've got a run of USC on the road, Utah at home, at Oregon State through the month of November, which will be, I think, a challenge. But the non-conference is, I think, soft enough in that the teams they're playing will give them a good crack at wins, but at the same time, we're talking about Boise State, Michigan State, Tulsa. These aren't like pushovers. So enough status to not discount them from a conversation, but at the same time, soft enough that they should be wins.
Also, Oregon State could beat any of those teams.
Yeah, well, sure.
I don't know if the Oregon State's built for a run to build upon with a bowl win, double-digit wins from last season. But if DJU works out, yeah, Jonathan Smith and Oregon State could beat any one of those 4 teams and end playoff hopes. And by the way, that is your next head coach of Michigan or Notre Dame or something, Jonathan Smith. Continue.
Let's go to Jen on Patreon. Kind of in that same vein, which team is going to be the big Cinderella story?
Okay, let's define
season?
it.
Let's define that. Cinderella, was TCU a Cinderella last year?
Definitely.
In your view?
Out of nowhere, first-year head coach, backup quarterback, much maligned during his time as a starter. Guys on defense transferring in, obviously new coordinators on both sides of the ball with that new head coach. That so many puzzle pieces came together. So that is the shattering of the glass coming into the Cinderella slipper together.
Was Cincinnati's run to the playoff in 2021 a Cinderella story for you?
No, because of what they did the year before. Because they built upon an already excellent season with an excellent roster and an excellent defense, that they were clearly of that caliber going into the season based on recent results, but needed to run the table, needed to beat Power 5 and top level teams to emphatically declare their case. So no, they were not Cinderella, especially because of their history as a quote unquote, power program given their time in the Big East.
So what I think we're defining here for Cinderella then is really steering into that unexpected quality.
Out of nowhere, right?
Out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Something coming out of nowhere. So I bring this question up next because we were talking about Oregon State. And though I think Oregon State has potential to achieve things within that program that they haven't before, everyone's really excited about Oregon State. Over-under is 8. A lot of people jumping on that over. I don't know if it's entirely unexpected because it's been building for a while. They add DJU. Presumably, this is a team that would fit more into that Cincinnati mold, like not to compare heads up. I know it's not apples to apples, but it wouldn't be unexpected in the way that TCU was unexpected last year if Oregon State won 11 games.
Sure.
Do you have an answer? Do you have a better answer?
I've got 2.
Cinderella? Yeah.
Well, my answers are always better, Ty. That's just a redundant turn of phrase here.
How dare you?
Okay, so your Texas Tech Red Raiders are interesting.
Okay.
Defense takes a nice step forward last year. It's a year 1 coach. They just declared, I believe, Tyler Shuck he was the overwhelming favorite, I think, the starting quarterback. I have my doubts about him as a high-level quarterback, but the best of Tyler Shuck is certainly very, very good for Texas Tech. Schedule's pretty good. The home road splits are pretty good. I know they finished, I think, in Austin, correct? And they have Oregon, albeit in Lubbock, early on in the season. So I think there's juice to Texas Tech. That would be out of nowhere. That would qualify as out of nowhere Texas Tech as a Cinderella playoff-ish type team. Wouldn't bet my own dollars on it.
Okay.
But in terms of how you might constructed. I think Tim DeRuyter's a pretty good defensive coordinator. I think there's talent on both sides of the ball, obviously losing their best defensive player, Tyree Wilson, in this last year's draft. My other one, I hate that I'm going to do this to him, Ty. I hate that I'm going to do it, but if you're asking me for Cinderella, that means you got to take a chance. You got to take a swing here. And this is another team that we talked about in our year 2 debrief or post year 1 debrief, Coach. You don't know where I'm going with this, do you? What's your guess? Just based on that intro, that
Miami?
Preamble. No, not Miami. Oh, it's not bad, though. Because of a healthy Tyler Van Dyke, because of changes at coordinator, because of an ACC that's sort of all over the place any given week.
You're going to go Arizona?
Not going Arizona.
No, I guess we didn't do Arizona either. So go ahead. Who's your team?
A team that was right there with top teams last year, who brings back a successful quarterback who lost close a bit too often last year, that hypothetically you lose close before you win close, added key pieces on offense in the portal, still have questions about defense, certainly. Schedule works out nicely in terms of situations. Maryland. Now,
interesting.
It's Cinderella because on its face right now, extremely unlikely. Totally with you. Again, wouldn't bet American dollars on it. The best of Talia is very good. They got 2 key pieces, I believe, even losing receivers, but 2 key pieces at receiver. Schedule is such that I think they have Ohio State in the wake of Ohio State playing Notre Dame, and they have Michigan in a sandwich situation between when Michigan plays Penn State and Ohio State.
Right.
So it's at least a touch of intrigue for me with Maryland. I don't believe them to have a strong case because of their defense, because I think they're replacing 4 or 5 offensive linemen. But if you're saying quarterback, Mike Locksley, the best of Mike Locksley, winning those 50-50 games right there last year with Michigan and Ohio State, that would be my answer of throw $4 to $5 with incredible odds and see how it plays out.
What are we betting on Maryland to do here?
I don't know. A Cinderella, like, so what qualifies as a Cinderella? 10 wins? 11 wins?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I believe we didn't talk about Maryland in terms of year 1 debriefs. We talked about Maryland.
Not year 1 debrief. You're right.
Maryland in terms of getting to 8 wins.
Right.
And I think 8 wins is very much in the cards. I think if Maryland gets to 10 wins, we could start talking about Cinderella.
Yeah.
I think that's very plausible. The case against Maryland, as you said, is defense. Also schedule. Even though they might have a team like a Michigan in an advantageous spot, they still do have to go to Ohio State. They still do have to play Penn State and Michigan, albeit at home. So it's not exactly an easy schedule by any stretch. However, I think we've gotten to the point now, at least with the offense, where we feel fairly confident that they're going to win 7 games, 8 games. And in order to take that next step, we had the whole conversation around what's it going to take? What's it going to take to get there? Brought on Jeff Ehrman to talk about what's it going to take to get there. Go back and listen to it. I considered Maryland for this answer. I don't think it's a bad answer. Can I posit another idea?
For Cinderella?
Yeah.
Okay.
In this marketplace of ideas that is a solid verbal.
Okay.
We have done nothing but talk down on this team for maybe a year straight.
Okay.
Despite some recent success, it has mostly been, I think, an exercise in wondering where things are headed.
Iowa?
And no, not a bad guess.
That would be awesome, though, wouldn't it? That would qualify as Cinderella.
I was going to bring up Iowa.
Okay.
If the offense kind of explodes and Brian Ferentz feels the heat under his seat.
That's the Iowa offense is known to do.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. I'm just saying that would be a Cinderella story for sure.
Uh-huh.
What about Oklahoma State?
Oof.
Here's the thing with Oklahoma State. Okay, again, now if we're talking about taking chances.
Well, it's not Cinderella because they were in the Fiesta Bowl like an hour and a half ago. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. Continue.
I think in the face of the narrative that you and I have put forth, that many others in college football media have put forth, that it feels like we don't know which direction this thing is headed. And some people have rightly pointed out, well, that's when Mike Gundy can sneak up on you. True, that can be true. I don't know if I buy it, but this is maybe one of the better schedules in the Big 12. It's easily the best road schedule in the Big 12. The The over-under is 6.5, so expectations are not high in Stillwater. Yeah. And, again, the schedule is such that provided they're not a total disaster, they win 7 games. They hit the over easily.
I think Alan Bowman's older than my dad.
I'm not. For the purposes of our show, we love that British comedy legend Alan Bowman is back in college football for his 18th season.
Yeah.
Hopefully he stays healthy for more than a minute and a half.
Yeah.
But all that being said, if they have something with Alan Bowman, if they can kind of get the offense back to a more consistent place, I don't know.
With the same coordinator who has taken them away from that consistent place.
Here.
Yeah.
We're taking chances.
Yeah.
Oklahoma State, because of the schedule, maybe Alan Bowman, it's a throwback to the days of yore. I don't know.
Sure.
Oklahoma State, maybe.
I'm not there. Okay, but that's okay. That's okay. I don't know if I have any other Cinderella teams. So we had somebody ask us about the future of the playoff with G5 teams. I guess it would be this season because it's going to be a playoff that features a G5 or 2 or whatever once it goes to 12.
Well, we had a couple questions here, and we kind of grouped these together. We got one from Gordon on Twitter. With the most recently successful group of 5 teams moving into the Power 5, what now needs to happen for a group of 5 team to make the playoff this year? Is it even possible? Right. And then we had, I think, sort of a related question from Instagram AMZ770 out on Instagram. What's going to happen to non-Power 5 schools? He says post 2025, or I guess post 2024. I would just sort of broaden it to say kind of in this new world of super conferences and big money and NIL and expanded playoffs. So we can maybe address both of those.
Sure.
Here, to Gordon's question, is it even still possible for a group of 5 team to make the playoff this year in the existing format, 4 teams, like we saw with Cincinnati in 2021? Is it even possible to you?
Yes. But it's going to take a little bit of elbow grease. So I'm never going to say never. But especially now with how much money is on the line for all of these major conferences where it's all, right, it's all TV stuff. It's all centered around, can they cobble together this amount in the postseason and this amount with streaming and this around, that there's just so much power to be wielded by the major conferences. So if you look at the teams that could take that Cincinnati jump that won 10-ish last year and establish themselves as a quality name, and could they take the next step, especially given early or non-conference opponents? You have like Fresno and Boise in the Mountain West. Boise has an opportunity against Washington and I think UCF, right, in terms of Power 5 opponents this year. That if they absolutely stomp Washington and Seattle, and then Washington goes on to have a 10-2 season, sure, we're having a conversation about Boise. Should the top of college football look pretty muddled come Thanksgiving? Right. And certainly they'd have to beat UCF in similar fashion.
I want to come back to that. That's my counterpoint, but continue.
Fresno has, I believe, Arizona State and Purdue both on the road, which would not be crazy calling card resume type, but they'd have to stomp those teams, and those teams would also have to be pretty good and just stomp the Mountain West. Tulane is interesting because they concluded last year having beaten both the Big 12 champion and the Pac-12 runner-up, right? In USC and Kansas State.
Correct.
And Tulane, I believe, only has one Power 5 opponent this year. They're at Ole Miss. I try to memorize as much as I can when I'm pooping and reading Athlon, but sometimes it slips by me. So if they stomp Ole Miss and Ole Miss is in the mix for the SEC West crown or something come later on in the year, and Tulane with the same quarterback as last year, they build upon their 2022. That's interesting. Who am I missing of the Power 5 strong or strengths?
So here's my case against. Okay, my case. So I think you're right to bring up Tulane. I think Tulane's the most obvious one. Boise, I'm just not sold because of the schedule. Fresno, Are you a Mikey Keene or Logan Fife believer?
Well, I'm just saying they went 10-4 last year, so they
Right.
have a household name as a head coach, and like they don't have the quarterback, but that's at least something. It'd have to be to me from the American or Mountain West.
I think it would have to. I mean, the Sun Belt's interesting. The Sun Belt has raised its profile, but I don't know if it's got the defense outside of like Troy. Coastal,
No, there's a
certainly.
bunch of teams with a good defense, but I just don't think the level in general is.
I don't think the level
caliber.
in general is there. Here is my case against. Okay,
Well,
I think
easy.
I think regardless of what the selection committee has said over the years, the credibility of a program, the image of a program matters.
Mm-hmm.
And it may not be as much about TV ratings as skeptics like me and maybe you have argued over the years, but it's a multi-year process to go about building your program into one that the committee feels won't be embarrassed on the big stage.
Yeah.
It took Luke Fickell 3 really good seasons at Cincinnati to get there, to get to the point where, okay, Cincinnati is now accepted as someone who can contend and be on that stage.
Right.
I don't know if any of those teams really exist this year. You know, Boise's been there. I don't think Boise is a realistic option this year because I think the schedule's tough.
Well,
I don't trust them.
We're talking about a universe in which they beat up on UCF and Washington. They beat each of those teams 35-13.
They beat it, but here's where I'm going with this next, and this is what I wanted to come back to. Okay,
please.
So Boise, I don't trust Boise because of the schedule.
That's
but
fine.
Okay, in this hypothetical world, sure.
That's
Fresno,
what it takes, though, right?
Yeah.
If they're
Sure.
undefeated and there's a couple 1-loss teams, a couple 2-loss teams come Thanksgiving, then we're having this conversation.
Tulane, the schedule might be favorable to that.
Yeah.
They bring back obviously Michael Pratt, who I think is a pretty good quarterback, and they have losses elsewhere. They tried to fill in gaps with the portal. I think Tulane will be pretty good as well. They probably win double digits again. But I think the circumstance that Cincinnati had working to its advantage in 2021 is that there was a very thin upper tier, very thin upper crust.
Yeah.
And they beat Notre Dame. The best win on their schedule was beating Notre Dame, 24-13, I think.
Which could be like Boise beating Washington.
Could be like Boise beating Washington.
Yeah.
But in that particular case in 2021, the upper crust of college football was really thin.
Yeah.
And there was no choice but to put Cincinnati in. I look at the field this year. I could speak a lot differently about it come December, of course, as we always do. But I don't think it'll be nearly as thin this year. I think there's a lot of variability at the top. I think it might be one of the thicker upper crusts that we've seen in a while in college football.
Ty likes it thick. Everybody knows that about Ty.
You know that about me. I think there will be a much larger pool of teams that are in contention later this season. And I don't think we're necessarily going to get to a point where it's like, well, if you're not going to put Boise in, if you're not going to put Tulane in, who are you going to put in? I don't think that will be the case this year. So my answer, unfortunately, Gordon, I think it's impossible this year. It will be very possible in 2024 because then a group of 5 teams is guaranteed to get in.
Yeah.
And depending on how you feel about some of the conferences, maybe there's a chance that we could get multiple G5 teams in. So that problem goes away after this season. But this year, anyway, I differ from you. I don't think it's possible. I do not think it's possible this season.
But to play devil's advocate or whatever at this point, you have Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State starting over at quarterback, Clemson starting over at quarterback full-time. We know who the quarterback's going to be. But the traditional teams that you could kind of pencil into that conversation kind of have a lot up in the air. The teams out west are all flawed. The teams in the Big 12 are all flawed and have questions that when you say thick, I think, again, 7 Cs, that might work to the advantage of a G5 because we might have a bunch of 9-2 teams.
No.
Right? Georgia will go undefeated every year, right? Until they don't. So, like, it's still one of those things to me where Alabama looks unbeatable and then Hugh Freeze and like Evan Ingram somehow destroy them. So I'm not confident in the thickness of undefeated teams at the top. That's the only thing to me.
Over here on Earth 1,
okay,
I think the only possibility would be Tulane because they've got the schedule for it. They've got the schedule to go undefeated. I don't know if they've got a schedule to be taken seriously in this conversation. So even if there are 1 or 2 lost teams, a smattering of them at the top because there's so much new, I don't know if they're part of that conversation because I think people will look at the schedule and scoff. If the best win at the end of the year is over Ole Miss, that's a good win for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're penciling in Ole Miss as a top 10 team the way we were penciling in Notre Dame as a top 10 team back in 2021 for Cincinnati when they had that win.
Right.
I just think it's different. So for me, it's not possible this year.
Okay.
It's just not. We can agree to disagree on that. If we kind of broaden this conversation out, then the question that we got from AMZ over on Instagram, what's going to happen to non-Power 5 teams in this new world? Let's just say. I don't know the exact perspective that this question is coming to us from. Starting next season, as I said, there will be at least one G5 team in the expanded playoff every year, which I think is a good thing. It's a good thing. We've been clamoring for that for a while. I've been clamoring for that for a while. There's a case to be made that the American, that the Sun Belt, I'll include the Sun Belt here, the Mountain West, certainly the Mountain West, that some of those conferences have raised their profile to the extent where they could maybe get more than one team in, that we could have more than one G5 team in. Likely playing in round one, likely playing on the road, but an accomplishment nonetheless if you can get into that.
Right.
That, I think, is a cool story, and it's great that they are included. I would also add that the undercurrent in college football is very much going against those teams. All right. From a non-playoff standpoint, because of the super conferences, because of the money that's coming in via these media deals, because of NIL, because of all these other factors that we have to talk about now, we're getting to a point where that gap between the haves and have-nots is only getting greater. And I don't think we're getting any closer to fixing the problem. So I think it's very long overdue that these teams are going to have a seat at the playoff table, and I will eagerly be rooting them on, provided they're not playing against one of my teams. But
how many teams are you up to now?
I guess I'm up to 2.
Okay.
Unless you count TCU,
year,
I don't. Yeah. Do we count TCU anymore?
Sure. Yeah, of course we do.
For a while, it was Georgia 2. I might have 4. I don't know.
On again, off again. Sure. Lehigh.
You know where I stand on Lehigh.
That's true.
It's a love-hate thing right now.
Yeah.
But it's like a double-edged sword for me. I'm pleased that they're going to get a seat at that playoff table. But again, over here, Earth One in college football reality, I can see that there are like very, very strong headwinds going against those programs. Well, I think that only gets accelerated the longer we get into like this new reality.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at this question through the lens of the playoff.
Well, not entirely. I'm saying through the lens of the playoff, it's okay. But through the lens of everything else, it's very much not okay.
It's a disaster, right?
Yeah.
Conference USA is wilting, right? After the American pluck teams. The American is wilting after the Big 12 pluck teams. We'll see what happens with San Diego State and the Pac-12. I think it's in a terrible place. You know, the idea of Power 5 and G5. And so the power conferences, however many there are in the coming few years, are going to strip whatever conference they'd like for parts because, we need 14 teams. We need 16 teams. It actually makes sense financially, whatever, that we're in this market, in this time zone, whatever, because that's how we have to talk about the sport now as dum-dums. So it's terrible. It is absolutely terrible. And so the top 3 teams are going to be fine in terms of an opportunity in the postseason. You know, whether it's Boise or Fresno, any of those teams that we're talking about, they'll have an opportunity to try and beat Ohio State or Georgia or Clemson or Florida State or USA, whoever, in a 12-team playoff. But I don't know. It still seems little more to me than a pat on the head and you can come in the club. Yeah. I don't know that you're getting the full dinner, but you can come in the club and hang out for a little while. Sit at that end.
They got a guest pass.
Right, exactly.
A guest pass to play the golf course, but that's pretty much it.
We're heading to a place where we're going to have gigantic conferences of teams that happen to be geographically located in the right place, and everything else is going to sort of fall by the wayside. And there's going to be there are only so many dollars, as we know, as we are still waiting for the Pac-12 deal to come through. The Big 12 did a good job. The Big 10 and SEC obviously did a good job. The ACC is locked in a weird place, but eventually some resolution will come from that in the next 1 to 40 years. Who knows how long the grant of rights thing will take to work itself out. But everything will slowly morph into 2 to 4 conferences, and the dollars and TV spots, there will be crumbs for whatever's left of the American or the Mountain West. And it's terrible for the sport. It's absolutely catastrophic and awful for the sport, but it's toothpaste that's long been out of the tube. So no, the very top will be all right, and maybe they'll succeed enough. Those 3, 4, 5, 6 programs that continuously win in those G5 conferences, maybe they'll earn an invite at some point. Somebody will throw them a bone, but I don't really see it happening all that often. It's in a terrible place. The future's terrible for the group of 5, and This is our doing as a college football universe.
We have a question here from CWT302 on Instagram. Yeah. Thank you. By the way, follow on Instagram if you haven't already.
Please do.
Question is, if you could hit pause at any point in college football realignment, where would it be and why? So we're hitting pause. There have been a couple waves of this now over the last decade or so. The obvious one to me is I would hit pause after TCU joined the Big 12.
What year is that?
2012. So that was TCU joining the Big 12. I believe West Virginia also came into the Big 12 in 2012. That was the same year that Colorado joined the Pac-12. I would not want to go much beyond that. There was also some movement after 2012.
What does that give us across the sport? Mizzou and A&M are in the SEC at that point. Yes?
Believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Nebraska's in the Big 10 at that point. Yes?
At that point, we have, I believe, Maryland voting to join the Big 10.
Yeah.
And Rutgers also voting to join the Big 10, but they weren't admitted until 2014. The Nebraska thing, I believe, happened in 2011. So this would be in under the wire there.
Yeah.
As for that.
Yep.
The Big 10 at that point only has 12 teams with Nebraska joining.
Yeah. So, I mean, the question is for all of these, for your answer, like, has the Big 10 become more interesting since Nebraska joined? Has the Big 12 become more interesting since joining the Big 12? I'd say yes to that. TCU to the Big 12, and Nebraska was a much more fun team in the Big 12, but that doesn't necessarily have to do with the movement. That more has to do with Nebraska itself. Mizzou is strong and interesting early on in their tenure in the SEC, as was A&M. Has the SEC become better with A&M in it? Somewhat, right? They've got a bunch of money. They've had big personalities. They've had big players, but they haven't really affected things consistently. I don't know. Like, you answered the question. So you'd rather live in a universe with Texas A&M and Mizzou in the SEC. I think I'd go back to 2009.
Okay.
I think if you gave me the option to watch a Big 12 with A&M and Nebraska and Texas and Oklahoma, I'd be pretty into it. And Mizzou, I'd be pretty into it. The TCU thing sucks. I'd rather have TCU in there than not. But if you're giving me the option of those 4 teams playing together and not TCU, I'd probably take that. I'd take a Pac-10 over a Pac-12, even with Utah's success, just because Colorado has been completely worthless, essentially, to the Pac-12.
Sure.
In terms of competitive contributions. Haven't cared about Nebraska in the Big 10 all that much.
I think the big thing for me,
yeah,
and this is why I kind of wavered on this answer. Yeah. I ultimately getting TCU in a Power 5 conference I thought was pretty important, because that had been a program that
I think that's totally good.
That deserved, and Utah to that extent, right? Those programs
totally
deserved to be in a Power 5 conference. So I'm pleased about that. But what you do lose a little bit of is the ACC. The current construction of the ACC, I believe, with Pitt and Louisville, and I think that was before Syracuse got its membership in the ACC. You kind of have at that 2012 period of time that weird cusp between, is the Big East failing or is it not?
Right.
And teams are starting to look around and see the landscape and jumping ship. That was kind of the ultimate.
But this is purely from
a
romantic standpoint.
From a romantic standpoint, I think 2012 is where I cut it off. 2012 is where I cut it off. And, we still sort of have this weird, like, the remnants of the Big East at that point.
Yeah, see, I feel next to nothing emotionally about getting to watch Boston College or Syracuse or Pitt play NC State or Florida State. I don't know. It's probably a thing where you're just like, you like what you like when you were 25 or something like that, or whenever your fandom was most aggressive and exciting. And so an ACC without Maryland, but with Boston College, Syracuse, Pitt, like Louisville, like, I don't know. It hasn't done a ton for me emotionally or romantically. We've had good games. We've had really fun performances. But in terms of how the sport is divvied up, it just makes less sense to me. Again, but that's because, we were starting the show in 2008, 2009, right? So that there's something ingrained and imprinted from whatever the sport was then. So it's highly personal, but it just feels like the contributions that a lot of these teams have made to those conferences are TV markets rather than either competitive contributions or, new rivalries. Like, yes, the Mizzou defensive line in 2013 was incredible. Yes, those early A&M SEC offenses were incredible. But by and large, the character and the sort of definition of these conferences, I don't know if it's been completely added to by realignment. It just, I don't know. It's just more teams in more attractive financial places than anything else.
The real Mikey Lowe, 34 on Instagram. How many fewer points per game are we expecting with the new clock rules? I did the math.
Yeah, okay.
I did the math problem early this morning to actually try and figure this one out. So, new clock rules this year in college football. You can go back and listen to what we had to say about them a few months back when they voted them in. There's been a lot written about it. The clocks. I don't know.
Stay with clops. Yeah.
The clops continue running on first downs now in college football.
Yeah.
So obviously this answer is somewhat dependent on the teams that are playing, but we do have data and it's easy to do the math. The new clock rules per projections are expected to eliminate about 7 plays per game, which isn't a lot, but it is enough to make a difference.
Right.
Points per play is something we very much track.
Yeah. Points per drive too. Yep.
So you can do the math and figure out exactly what we're talking about here. The average number of points per play in FBS last season was 0.379. Basically, if you imagine an offense in between Wisconsin and Washington State, that was about the average offense in terms of points per play.
Okay.
If you do the math for those teams, multiply by 7, it's about 2.5 points per game. Round up like 3 points per game fewer. If you take a team like an Ohio State,
well, that's 2 teams playing a game, so it'd be 6
I understand
points,
that.
Right?
I'm just kind of giving you a baseline.
Okay.
If you run those numbers for a team like Ohio State, it's closer to 0.65 points per play, which is crazy. So for them, it would be about 4.5 points. If you try to factor in what it means when you've got 2 teams playing and not just one, 2.5 to 4 points fewer per game seems like it's possible. I don't think it's going to be anything so drastic that we're going to look back on these clock changes and say this affected the game in any kind of drastic way, right? It's not going to be suddenly we don't have shootouts or suddenly we don't have the style of play that we're accustomed to seeing. I think it will be a rather moderate impact, and we won't see it as much in terms of the final score. But look, we'll be able to figure it out at the end of the season, and we can see if there's any kind of major takeaway. I think it'll be modest, maybe a field goal less per game.
Yeah, who knows? My only thought is because the clock will be running more often, that might also speed up aggression of teams who are behind by 2 or 3 scores early on in the third quarter, and suddenly they're playing more aggressive, they're scoring more often, even if they're still losing that game, and it just sort of course corrects that teams aren't going to be as deliberate in the second half and slow down the scoring. So the scoring might be very similar based on coaches feeling a little bit more fire underneath them when they're behind. And so that could lead to very just identical scoring as coaches sort of pick up on the rhythms of the new rules.
From Petey over on Instagram, who's the best quarterback we won't notice because he's on a bad team?
Sam Hartman?
This is a tough question. This is actually a tough question.
No, okay,
because,
there's a bunch of good answers for this. Continue.
Well, I mean, what makes it hard for me is won't notice because they're on a bad team. So, for example, I think Shadur Sanders is a really interesting answer here. I think it'll be hard not to notice Shadur Sanders because his father is Deion Sanders.
Right.
And because of all the dust that's been kicked up around the Colorado program. But that's interesting to me.
Okay.
That's interesting to me. I think TVD is an interesting answer, provided Miami doesn't get its stuff together.
But they're visible. Even when they're not good, they're super visible.
But they're visible. Exactly. Yeah. I think Michael Pratt may go unnoticed, but I think he'll be on a really good team. We just talked about them.
Agree.
As potentially a 10-win team. So I struggled with the answer here because I could not satisfy both elements of this question, unnoticed and a bad team. But
what about Jalen Daniels?
Jalen Daniels. Okay.
I could argue last year he was not a household name. Even Jason Bean was very good for Kansas for long stretches. Otherwise, like, are you a believer? Was it AJ Swan for Vanderbilt? The best of AJ Swan was pretty good. He was a freshman last year. Was that his name, AJ Swan? I don't want to get that wrong.
Yeah.
For a bad team this year, it's hard to be a good quarterback for a bad team because usually good quarterbacks are just going to get attention. I don't think I see it happening in the Big Ten, in the Big 12. Like if Hunter Deckers is good or whoever, who's the freshman? I think it's Cole or Kohler for Iowa State. If he's good, they're going to get attention because they're going to win games because the defense should be good again. No, it's really tough to have a good quarterback.
It's hard.
I guess another answer might be Riley Cooper. If Duke is like a 500-ish team, but they're a 4-8 or 3-9 team without him because he was so do everything as a freshman, I think.
I mean, Riley Leonard, Riley Cooper, definitely a different player.
Riley Cooper, definitely different. Riley Leonard, thank you very much. Multiple Rileys. I guess those would be my answers.
Okay, we've got a handful more here that I want to get through.
Yeah.
Let's go to our friends, the college football nerds, who sent in a tweet.
Okay.
What style of football do you most and least enjoy watching? Thank you for the question, guys. Appreciate what you do.
Good football. Next question.
Good football.
What style?
I hate old school Army Navy option. I hate it.
I know you're out.
You're
out of your mind.
I absolutely detest it.
Yeah.
I enjoy watching wide open offenses. A lot of scoring. Not super air raidy. Okay, like the old Mike Leach style, like Texas Tech stuff, which was interesting on a schematic level and was interesting given the matchup. Mm-hmm. It was just so far skewed in the direction of offense that it was like a little bit much for me. But in general, I like a really good passing offense that plays at a decent enough clip and is able to involve 3 wide receivers. I don't mind a little bit of the zone read stuff, but I like it being wide open. I like it playing at a decent pace, and I don't want it to be super duper gimmicky like I sometimes felt the air raid was.
So can I pivot this question just
please,
ever so slightly?
Please.
Who has put forth the most aesthetically pleasing offense to your semi-colorblind eyes? So I don't hate the work of Lincoln Riley. The best of Lincoln Riley. So Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, Jalen Hurts, etc.
Yeah.
Caleb Williams. The
Sure.
best of Lincoln Riley. Is that it? But that's we're talking stylistically.
Right.
Like, which again, I'm not saying your answer's wrong. It's your answer. It's personal. So just like the ability for, I mean, a lot of balance with those teams. Running backs have put up a ton of yards in Lincoln Riley offenses. Receivers have been in Biletnikoff conversations. Quarterbacks have been Heisman, first overall picks. So is there a single year in which
I can't give you a single year. No, I can't give you a single year. But what I like about those so it definitely skews more on the pass side. They're very quarterback heavy, but they've done so in a way that does not feel gimmicky.
Okay, so
to me,
how do you feel about incredibly successful offenses built around RPO type stuff?
It has grown on me.
Okay.
It has grown on me, right? It is kind of a variation of the option. That's what it is. It's just a different version of it. I mean, my favorite offense, I've talked about this before. My favorite offense is what they ran at Coastal Carolina.
Yeah.
Under Jamie Chadwell.
Yeah.
Because it was everything. It was just all the good stuff that you like. They didn't play defense. All right. That's a different conversation. But in terms of offense, I like that because it was super multiple. It was all the formations, all the concepts that I think we find interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And they still did so in a way that didn't feel like I was, again, watching some sort of gimmick.
Right.
It felt very cohesive to me.
So in the past 15 years or so, if I'm going to exclude Chip Kelly Oregon offenses, which are obviously near and dear, but too personal.
Very gimmicky, finesse oriented.
How dare you? Right, how dare you? Those were incredible for me. So if I exclude those, there was something pretty wonderful about the combination of bruising quarterback and just crazy speed of those 06, 7, 8 Florida teams with Tim Tebow. That was incredibly aesthetically pleasing to me with the amount of speed on the field and then just having a giant
a bowling ball with eyes.
It was just like a Michelin tire at quarterback, the Michelin tire man, whatever, at quarterback, where I love offenses where you're like, I know exactly what they're going to do. The defense knows exactly what they're going to do, and it's going to work, right? Yeah. It's 4th and inches, and Tim Tebow's in the shotgun, and he's just going to barrel forward like a front-end loader. That I like. I like that. That was aesthetically pleasing because you marry that with the speed on that offense. You're right to mention the Lincoln Riley offenses. I really enjoyed the best of Penn State under Joe Moorhead. We called it I don't know if it was 2016, the F it, go deep. Now there's RPO stuff, but the idea that Penn State was going to trot out a bunch of 5'10 and a half receivers and just run by you. And then when you kind of figured that out, Saquon Barkley was around. That was pretty incredible to watch from just a TV show perspective. I both loved and got kind of bored with Mac Jones era Alabama and that kind of dominance with those 4 receivers and Najee Harris. That it was incredible to watch, but the games would last 3.5 minutes. We were like, well, okay, onward. In terms of other aesthetically pleasing offenses, I guess, the best of Deshaun Watson and Clemson were pretty great. So I guess it's that element of balanced power spread with incredible receivers. And whoever was able to somehow lock that in, great. Those were my teams.
What style do you not like? Do you least enjoy watching? Right. I said old school,
right? Army,
Navy. I really despised the latter years of Les Miles at LSU. It didn't feel like the offense had much cohesion to it. I don't know what they were doing. They would do the sort of toss dive, which I grew to love over the years in the running game. And there were, I think, some things that did really well, but it was not aesthetically pleasing and felt like it was all over the place. What don't you like?
I don't like offenses that are very clearly there to serve the defense. That you have these defensive head coaches where you're just look, we want to keep the defense rested. We want to keep the scores low. We want to possess the ball. We want to wear down the other team. I completely understand the aims and the goals and the sensibility behind it. It's just not that fun to watch. Run, play action to a tight end sneaking out for 3 yards on 3rd and 2 or something like that. It's not fun, that kind of possession style. It's not an under center thing because I've grown to really love how the smarter NFL minds, and even Liam Cohen a couple years ago at Kentucky, were able to use different formations and find mismatches, and use fullbacks, all that stuff. That's great by me. Be creative and find mismatches however you want to do it. But the plotting, not taking chances, even the Utah offense these past few years under Andy Ludwig, it's undeniably successful. But if you're not able to generate bigger plays in the passing game in 2023, when you can utilize RPO stuff, the Utah offense has not been fun to me. Successful, but not a fun watch.
I've got 4 more questions here, Dan. Let's go back to Patreon, our good friend Ween.
Yeah.
If you could take any job in college football, commissioner, coach, cheerleading, choreographer, medical staff, recruiting, aisle, usher, et cetera, which would you pick?
Oh my God, shady bowl rep. Are you kidding me? Just travel the country, expense everything, make a ton of money for doing very little, and Look, all you have to do is not get caught up spending Fiesta Bowl funds on a strip club or something like that.
Correct.
Shady Bowl rep? You get to wear generally interesting blazers.
Yep.
You get to go to games. You get to shake hands. You get to make money for doing, again, very little. I think Shady Bowl rep, unless we're talking about you have to work for a team or a program in some fashion. That's my answer.
What about the TV ref who comes out on the field?
The TV, well, see, that's boring. You don't do much.
You don't do much. You get paid.
Like the guy who wears the orange armband who alerts the crowd.
You get paid, but think of the power that you have in that position. Everybody in the stadium is waiting on you. They're watching you, waiting for you to step off the field.
Yeah.
You never really have to risk being criticized because you're just doing what the guy in the earphone tells you to do. You're not making calls, right? You're just sort of ushering the game, the broadcast along. You have all the power in the world when you're out there on the field. The stadium stops waiting for you.
You're asking me if
and there's no pressure. There's no pressure.
There's no pressure, but you're asking me if I'd rather stand on the field, stand on my feet for 4 straight hours to do something every few minutes of no consequence in terms of like brain power, whatever, or go somewhere every weekend and eat a seafood tower the night before a game on somebody else's dime.
But you have more power if you're that TV ref.
Oh, man, I don't need the power. I just need the lifestyle, Ty. I just need the lifestyle.
What about operating the Jumbotron?
It's fun, but you got to be locked in, Ty.
I know, but both you and I are, I think, fully engaged when we do this show.
Sure.
We have to be locked in to do this. We're not... Well, maybe you are beneath where you'd need to be technically in order to do something of this ilk. Operate a Jumbotron.
Listen, this is my challenge to you. Find a job you'd rather do than making $350,000 working for the Fiesta Bowl, eating super well, watching the game from a suite, and doing all of it every week.
I'm just playing devil's advocate.
I'm just
saying.
That's a
great answer.
It's not my challenge for you. It's my challenge for literally anybody. Find a better job in the sport than making way too much money to simply watch the game, shake some hands, wear a golden blazer, and go to huge games just to see for yourself if Alabama is Sugar Bowl worthy.
It is the definition somehow of proactive passive income.
Yeah. Again, I'm open to it. If somebody can find a better job than that within the sport, I will admit defeat. But as it stands now, if you're making 6 figures doing that, you're in a good place.
Dan, next question comes to us from a gentleman who you apparently bumped into at the grocery store named David.
Oh, nice. Yes, I did.
Do you have any advice or thoughts on how to handle when you are invited out for something social on a college football Saturday when you'd rather be in front of a TV? Watching all the games. I'm not talking about a clear obligation like a family event, taking care of your kids, et cetera, et cetera. More like a lunch that could easily just be another day, or a movie. You tell them the truth that you would rather watch football, hang out with them some other point in time. Or you just make something up. You say you have plans, keep it vague.
Right.
Hope they don't ask for details. He says he's now in his 6th decade of life and still struggles with this. Thank you, David. We will do our best to help you here.
What's your answer? Because we always kind of disagree.
We do.
On social advice.
Well, for starters, we've been doing this a long time. We are, of course, very skilled in the dark arts of Saturday misdirection.
Yeah.
We're okay at this, even if we differ on the strategy.
Well, since you've become officially official,
it's
you
easier.
You have a little more weight behind you. Yeah.
First off, keep it vague. Keep it vague. Having other plans, quote unquote, other plans, is usually good enough to get you off the hook. If it's not somebody who's going to press you, you say, we have plans. That works. I think the vast majority of the time.
Sure.
2, if that doesn't work, and if you are as conflict averse as I am, feeling sick, quote unquote, feeling sick.
Dude, I've got some gnarly diarrhea. I don't know if I can make it.
I was going to say, dropping some hints that it may be stomach related works 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to deal with that.
Yeah.
So I think if the vague stuff doesn't work, feeling, stomach's not right, ate something that didn't agree with me, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah.
That type of thing, David, will almost always work.
But it kicks the can down the road, though. That's the problem. The problem is if you get an invite from...
He's not saying he doesn't want to hang out with these people.
No,
He's just saying he doesn't want to hang out with them on Saturday.
Right. So I think you either have to do one of two things. Either you have to be like, look, most Saturdays I'm watching college football. What does your Sunday morning look like? What does your Friday night look like? Right? You just got to pivot to another day or another point in time. My best advice, aside from suggesting that you have gnarly diarrhea every Saturday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. That's weird. I don't know what he's eating Friday night, but it just
so
keeps
much
coming
fiber
back.
in his diet. It's preposterous.
I've done this a few times. Now, again, this is different for me because got to watch the games. This is the gig. If you like the person, just say counter. You want to pick up some meatball subs and watch Texas Alabama over at my place because I've been looking forward to this game for quite some time. I've done this. People know that this is what I do, so it's not like I don't have to make something up, but it depends on the person. It depends on your personality as a game watcher. Like Ty's out there. Ty's a weird Notre Dame game watcher. He has to sit in the same seat. He has to wear the same shirt. He has to sit with the same people. But provided if Solid Wife Kate says, hey, I know it's Saturday. I know you got to watch, but so-and-so is in town from Delaware, and they kind of want to go out with us, like Steve and Kathleen. Do you feel comfortable saying, hey, it's LSU Bama. It's huge. I got to watch it. Can't really swing it, but I'm open to bringing in like a bunch of Mexican food and watching it with them. Is that not something? Because I've done that. Like I remember last season, I think it was a night game, but there was a bunch of good games going on, including an Oregon game. And they're like, and I remember Jody asking me, like, is there a bunch of like big games or something? And there was like kind of, but not really. And I was like, just tell them to come over and watch games with us. We'll order like some takeout. And like, they understand that I'm watching football, but like we have a big couch. Let's all watch football and hang out. And if you don't want to watch and don't talk about it with your friend, I don't care. It's, I don't care who's on the couch as I watch football, really. Right. If they meet a certain like level of being fun to be around, I don't really care. But if it's somebody that like it depends on where they are in your social circles. If it's somebody you're like, it's June, whatever, I'll go out with them and grab some Spanish food or something.
What if this is a Facebook friend that you're not in contact with, but you don't see regularly, and they just decided, let's get together. We haven't seen each other in forever. It'd be nice to connect and grab a sandwich.
And this is not you or me speaking that.
No.
We have the excuse where we got to watch the games. If it's somebody who wants to reconnect, say, and you don't want to watch football with them.
Well, you probably don't want to invite them over to their house, to your house.
You don't want to invite them over to your place.
Years, Dan. Come on.
Right. I just say grab coffee with them in the morning before the games start if you're not on the West Coast, or, go to work late on Friday or do it Sunday morning. I don't think you really need to like lie about having gnarly diarrhea. I just think you pick your time.
Other plans, man. David, just tell me you got other plans.
Yeah. But again, if you like them, have them over.
Yeah. If you like them, have them over. Otherwise, vague plans usually does the trick. If that doesn't do the trick, then, gnarly diarrhea, always on the table.
But if you are a bad game watcher, if you are a Wisconsin fan and it's Wisconsin, Michigan, and you are constantly yelling at the TV and you are throwing things and you are burying your face in a pillow on huge moments and you are generally acting like all of us do at some point, right, as college football fans, and you don't want to expose that person to that side of you, don't have them over. Don't have them over. Don't. But if you feel confident that you are just watching this game because you're interested and you don't have directly personal stakes, like it's LSU Bama, but you're neither an LSU fan nor a Bama fan, but you've been looking forward to this game for 3 weeks. Just like, hey, I'm actually really looking forward to this game. Like, would you want to get some takeout and come over? I think that's fine if you like them.
If you like,
and you're not a horse's ass because you're watching your team play a big game. I say that because I am a horse's ass watching big Oregon games, and Ty is a horse's ass watching big Notre Dame games.
Yes.
So it's case by case, but I say err on the side of being social if you like them, and again, gnarly diarrhea if you just cannot find anything else in your mind.
Ty watching his team's plural play has decidedly less polish than the podcasting persona. Let's say that.
But you're much more pronounced with Notre Dame in terms of your emotions.
Many F-bombs.
A big game.
Many F-bombs, to say the least.
But if
Two
you're watching,
final questions.
If you're watching Penn State, unless it's like, how were you during Penn State USC in the Rose Bowl? Were you a wreck going back and forth?
No, that was just a fun game.
Okay.
And it's an exhibition game. It's an exhibition game.
Oh, no. It's the Rose Bowl is something else. Okay. Continue.
2 final questions here. Selfishly, I needed to ask this one from Will on Instagram.
Okay.
Would you ever consider a Solid Verbal Golf Invitational? Man, would I love to do this, Dan. Oh.
Okay.
I would love to do this. I would need your help, though, in setting this up.
Yeah.
I don't know. See, this is why I wanted to volley this one over to you. I would just like to play in it. I don't know if... I get very intense about these types of things. I would play in this, and I'd be all smiles and happy to have people there, and I would want to win. I'd want to cut everyone's heart out and win. That's just who I am. I wouldn't show it, but I think it would cloud my ability to put together a good tournament. You are, I think, between the two of us, the master of hospitality, not just with the pizza, but just in general.
How would you determine?
You're inviting people over that you barely know to watch football with you. You're better at this than I am, so help me put this together. How do we do this?
I'm not saying I barely know them. I'm just saying they're friends that I'm just going to turn down going out to dinner on a Saturday night during the season, but I don't care. They can come over.
So what makes for a good hypothetical golf invitational? Are we inviting people to play, like listeners, other than I think we need other college football podcasters? Yeah.
Well, how does it generally work? Usually, like golf tournament invitational stuff, it's either a charity thing where you have to donate a certain amount of money.
Right.
And that's how it usually works within the college football universe, right? It's a bunch of donors, and you get to be in, Chip Kelly or Nick Saban's foursome if you are on a super tier. So in this situation, I think you have to donate a bunch of money to us to get into the tie foursome. I don't golf, so I'm just there. I'll just be the
you're the MC. You're the MC.
I'm the marshal, Ty. I'm just skipping around the course in my cart, shaking hands and yelling at people.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm the MC. I'll introduce people at the first tee from Northampton, Pennsylvania.
Thank you.
I'm happy to do that. I think listeners, you got to cap it at a certain point. There has to be some sort of entry fee. There has to be some kind of, I think, dress code of some kind.
Okay.
I think you have to wear a team polo, right, to show your allegiance. I think that would be a cool college football thing.
Need a team polo. Yeah.
I think you got to have a food element to it. On the 19th hole, whatever. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what else. I wonder if you would have final approval in the tie foursome, because that's obviously the most coveted.
That's the most coveted spot. But I mean, would who else would we invite? Would it just be Solid Verbal people? Would we extend the olive branch out to
whoever?
Others?
Yeah, anybody in the college football media members, sure. Where would this be though? Because as lovely as I'm sure your part of the world is,
it couldn't be here.
I just think there's not a lot of the combination of listeners congregating and media members congregating. So would it be in Houston for the national championship?
I was going to say, where is a spot where we could get everybody to go willingly?
Well, we have a bunch of listeners in Texas. College football media members will be in Houston, right? That's where this upcoming national championship is.
Correct.
Yes?
Correct.
It's a warmer part of the country in January, even though it's probably not going to be scorched earth. It's going to be warm. So it's not like we're having this golf invitational in Minneapolis or Indianapolis or any of the Palaces come national championship time. So that would be my guess as the thing that makes the most sense. Has there been a U.S. Open in the Houston area recently? Because I'd want to get you on like a legit, let me see, U.S. Open golf wiki.
It might be somewhere down there
courses.
next year.
Is that true?
I believe so.
Let's see. I'm looking it up right now. If there's been a recent,
I believe next year.
Cypress Creek. Is that something you've heard of? In 1969, Houston hosted the U.S. Open.
Oh.
I'm looking right now. Dallas had one in 1952. Fort Worth had one in 1941. There have been 3 U.S. Opens in Texas. There was a recent tournament in Houston, though, right? Wasn't there a recent?
Well, they have them there every so often. No, I lie. It's not next year. Maybe
Okay.
I saw something else. All right. Let's move on. Anyway, if you have suggestions for that, solidverbal@gmail.com.
I do tennis. Somebody needs to name a college football media member who can beat me at tennis.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm the best. I just need somebody to tell me.
Somebody to posit a theory.
Like, is Andy Roddick now covering college football? He'll destroy me.
Right.
But if you're pairing me against anybody covering I'm pretty confident. I don't know how you feel confidence-wise in the golf world, because so many more people golf, especially
more
if
people
you're
golf,
middle-aged covering the sport. Yeah.
more people golf. I could hold my own. But I
Current
don't know
handicap, you're about a 7 right now?
It's still being firmed up, but
Okay.
I probably am down to closer to a 5.
Okay.
I'd say.
All right.
So I could hold my own. I don't know if I could beat everybody,
Oh,
but
I think
I'd
this
do
is a
better
great
than
idea.
most.
I think
Better
if we
than
can
most.
do, better than most. That's what? No laying up? Better than most.
Better than most.
I think we could do. Houston's got the food. It's got the weather. It's got the college football people. It's got the listeners. We have to figure out. Maybe that's our move next year to have that invitational.
Final question from Chaka over on Patreon. What is the complaint in the comments you get most regularly over the years that you just don't get? Either because it's not true or you just aren't sure of the genesis of said complaint. Okay. Thank you, Chaka.
Okay.
I have learned how personal college football is for people, how central it is to one's identity. So I would say to that end, the comments tend to be a lot like the Amazon reviews, where people focus on the very specific things that are meaningful to them and perhaps nobody else. Like,
Right.
the product was great, but if you're over 6'3", 1 star, would not recommend.
Right.
We have had a couple comments like that recently, I think, from Minnesota fans who, in my opinion, are overvaluing the Greek freak, Athan Kaliakmanis, and therefore kind of throw out our entire thesis on PJ
Right.
Fleck and the Golden Gophers in 2013. All this is okay. I'm not complaining about the feedback or anything like that. But
Right.
this is what makes the sport great. These are the types of complaints I think we get more often than not. It's not,
Sure.
the product sucks. It's you got this one specific thing wrong and we don't agree with everything because of it, which I get.
Right.
The general complaint that we have gotten over the years that I know where it comes from. I understand why we get it, but I know is not true is when people say, "Oh, you didn't do the research. This guy does. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He didn't do
Right.
the research." Let me share a thing about this job.
Maybe you're just bad at researching. Maybe you did the research.
Maybe.
You're just bad at it. Yeah.
Maybe that's possible,
Yeah.
but all we do is research.
Yeah.
Okay, that is the dirty secret about this. All we do is research. We're pretty good, I think, in front of microphones. We get along and we
Yeah.
like each other, and we can make all this sound good. But
Mm-hmm.
we don't have producers helping us with the info, with the audio, the video, any of that stuff. It is
Right.
all we do most of the week is research to
Mhm.
get ready for this show. Sometimes better than others, but that's the one complaint.
Mhm.
That's the one that you see from time to time. I'm sure everybody else who's involved in this world gets the same thing. Oh, do your research. Do your research. You don't know what you're talking about. We do plenty of research. Doesn't always come out the way we want, but trust
Right.
me when I say we do plenty of research.
Yeah. I don't really have a good answer for this. It's not a cop-out answer. Like, people are extremely personal about their team. So if we say something they don't like or agree with about their team, they're not going to like it.
To throw the
And
whole
guess
thing
what?
out, right? The whole thing goes away. Yeah.
Guess what? If somebody says something about Notre Dame or Penn State that you don't appreciate or agree with,
Dead. They're dead to me.
right. And
Dead
so
to me.
I kind of understand all the complaints, right? That like we have to the best of our ability, learn about teams and situations and then formulate opinions, not takes, but opinions. Like, okay, is this meaningful? Is this not meaningful? If you're a fan of a team, college football is crazy tribal. This is not lost on us. That you are going to dislike us or the show if we say something that you perceive to be biased or against your team. Like, if I say something because I'm an Oregon fan, that I don't hide that fact that I went to Oregon, I'm a proud alumnus, and I root for the Ducks. And so as an Oregon fan, it feels good when Oregon beats Washington. It feels good when Oregon beats USC or Oregon State or one of those things. But I like to think I can still say, yes, that duo of Washington receivers is incredible. Like, their linebackers, they're great. And so it doesn't matter to Washington fans because they already know I'm an Oregon fan, so they've made up their mind about me. And that's cool. That's okay. Yeah. It doesn't keep me up at night. So a long time ago, I learned, like, look, everybody's not for everybody. And so if you like this show on a certain level, you either like Ty enough to put up with me, or you like me enough to put up with Ty, or you just like both of us. And if you don't like the show, that's cool too, because it's personal. You have your choice about who to listen to when you're doing the dishes, when you're working out, when you're on a plane, whatever. Everybody's not for everybody. And so while I believe that there have been times that, like, look, we're talking about this NC State Maryland game, this Texas Tech game with some kind of authority, even though we didn't watch every snap, and that's clear to somebody, that sucks to us to feel that way, that we're talking about a game that we didn't watch every snap of. We're doing the best we possibly can, and that means hours upon hours of trying to ingest as much information as possible. But otherwise, no, I'm not going to say somebody's complaint isn't valid. It's a personal thing.
It's a personal thing. And look, here's what I come back to, and I think we can close out on this.
Yeah.
What I appreciate about even the complaints that we've got, most of them, the overwhelming majority, are very constructive. They disagree with something we said. But I think, to a comment, it's because people care about college football.
Of course.
You know, you wouldn't be motivated enough to post the comment or the feedback or the complaint if you didn't care about your team, if you didn't care about college football. And look, might not be for everybody, but those are the exact type of people that we want to listen to this show, because you care about this thing as much as we do. And that's what makes the whole thing fun. So thank you.
Yeah. Look, if you don't like Ty, first of all, you're pretty stupid. Ty's the best.
I mean,
if you don't like Ty, that's okay. If you don't like me, that's okay. Right? And it's one of those things that you just can't control. You got to do your very best. And if you think I'm a food snob who talks too much about food and is an Oregon homer and makes fun of Mario Cristobal and does what, fine. That's okay. I can only go with what's in my stomach, what's in my gut, what's in my brain. We all are who we are, and you either like it or you don't. And I sleep really, really well, Ty, because...
Oh, really, really well. Pulling out the sleep card. All right.
No. You let me finish the sentence.
Oh, please.
I sleep really, really well because I have a great time with you. I'm proud of the show that we do. And when you have the kind of gnarly diarrhea that I have all of the time.
Every Saturday. It's crazy.
I'm hydrated. I have an empty stomach and I just sleep like a baby. So, no, that's my answer. There's no complaint that irks me because, like, I can't control that.
No,
right? I can do the best I can do, and that's what I do.
The research one irks me from time to time, but by and large, I know it comes from a good place for most people.
But you also know that if you preview a game and you say, I think Nebraska's garbage and overrated, and they're going to lose to Michigan State, and somebody comments, doesn't do his research, doesn't know the Nebraska's, they've been beat up, but now they're going to be healthier, and they never lose to Michigan State, and then they lose to Michigan State.
Oh, yeah.
You do not get that follow-up.
No.
You do not get the, that's on me. Mea culpa. I guess Ty did do his research, and upon further reflection, his take was pretty well thought out. You don't get those that much.
You don't get that. You don't get that. Well, look, thank you to one and all for sending in your questions. I couldn't get to all of them, but I feel like we're at a spirited discussion today. I appreciated everything that we had a chance to discuss. We'll be back again on Thursday. Stay tuned for more info on where we're going to go next with that episode. Don't forget, if you want to further support what Dan and I do, verballers.com, VERBALLERS.com. That's our Patreon. Going to be rolling some new stuff out there shortly.
Yeah.
Also, make sure you follow along on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, of course, YouTube, where we post videos and clips of all of our episodes. If nothing more, hit subscribe or follow, whatever you can on your podcasting app. That makes sure that you get all of our episodes. Tell a friend if you've already done that. That's all I got, Dan.
That's all I have.
For that guy over there, my good friend, Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hillenbrand. Thanks again for downloading, for listening, for playing along at home. We will talk to you all Thursday. Stay solid.
Peace.